Happy you could join us on National Panda Day was what I picked here. I'm tempted to see where this goes. We've got two producers in the house, which I'm happy about because we've got Ron on the board. He won a work award today, so we congratulate Ron. He did great, and we also have MLB. Staying true to his name, he's in Lakeland right now, and so I know both of you don't always care for the question of the day, but I'm going to ask it anyways. So it's National Panda Day. I'm curious what your favorite kind of panda-related thing is, because we have a lot of options that I'd like to run by you guys. We have the regular just panda bear that you would find at the zoo. You have the red panda, which is the small version. You have red panda, the halftime act that balances all the plates. You have Panda Express, and you have Hello Panda, the treat. So this is a lot more panda options that I bet you guys thought I could come up with. So any takers? Aaron's looking down. Mike's probably just waiting for me to pitch it to him for baseball. So we
Well, the Panda Express thing hit me when you said. I'm glad you gave me a lot of ideas because I remember a stuffed toy the kids had when they're young, Panda Bear. But the Panda Express, my wife's a huge fan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm really out of panda ideas.
Oh, well, that works. What do you got, Aaron? Do you know any of the? Has anybody heard of Red Panda, the halftime act?
I have not.
Okay. Well, we're gonna see. I would imagine. Well, we'll have to see if the guests have heard of her because she's a fairly prominent halftime act at like the NCAA tournaments. She balances like on a unicycle, and then she balances bowls on her head and her feet and her hands and all of that. So
no, yeah, I'm lost on that one.
well, we'll have to put out a video on the social media or something. But anyway,
there you go.
we got MLB doing a live report. I like this, MLB. You're doing a live report from Lakeland. So tell me how it's been going down there with our Tigers in Lakeland.
They're looking good today. Come out with a 7th spot in the first inning. Jack Flaherty started, gave them 5 strong innings. Tired a bit in the 6th, but they took him out. But I think I'm trying to think of the score: 12-6, 13-6, something like that was the final. And a lot of as spring training goes, a lot of no names you've never heard of are in the field and up at the plate towards the end of the game, which is fine. They have to get their feet wet too. But they're looking good. McGonigal, I've been saying I hope they keep him down somewhere. I don't want to have him get overwhelmed by having a rough start, and because he's never been above triple or double A. And he walks up there today, first at bat, 2 guys on, puts it into the right field bleachers. So he's not giving them a lot of reason to keep him down. I don't know what they're going to do. They only have a week and a half left to opening day, so they're going to have to make up their mind pretty quick. But he was like 2 for 3 today. Had a bases loaded walk also, so he's good plate discipline. I don't know what they're going to do. Anyway, it was just fun, and I don't want to rub it in, but it was 86 degrees down here, guys. And luckily my son got his seats. We're up under the overhang, and so we're out of the direct sunlight. But it was beautiful down here in Florida, and I know you guys aren't enjoying the same.
And you ate great food, and you're having a nice, relaxed time. No, we're happy for you. We're glad that you're down there. I'm never the jealous type when somebody goes on vacation. I don't like being jealous. I don't think that's good. I'm happy you're having fun in the sun, and frankly, not here in this because it's a mess. It was sunny, but also snowing. So that's just very unsettling to have that combo.
Exactly. No, it's a true guy trip too because my son lives in Chattanooga, and so I left my wife there with his wife in Chattanooga, and my son Mike's buddy flew down to Lakeland here. So the 3 of us guys are doing this thing for 3 straight days. We're seeing 3 games. So spring training baseball with his son and his buddy. What could be better?
Well, the McGonigal thing is interesting to me, Mike, because I've been kind of on this bandwagon for a while. I get the strategy in keeping them down and all of that, but given that he plays a position that they're not exactly too set at in the left side of the infield there, they could use some reinforcements. They, as we talked about when you were on the show, they didn't necessarily reinforce that through free agency. So I kind of thought that meant that they would go to him sooner. And he just seems like the classic MLB ready prospect. Like he's like you said, he's got plate discipline. He seems like he'll be able to ride the ups and downs of being cold, going through a cold streak, all of that. He's just a very professional hitter at every level. And so part of me is like, well, why leave him down if you feel like you can then flex guys like McKinstry and Baez around a little bit more if you've got an everyday shortstop that is a future franchise cornerstone for you.
I was hearing something about the Al Kaline story just the other day, comparing him. Al Kaline never played a day in the minors. He walked right into the clubhouse, pro level, from out of high school. And, could this be another Al Kaline type talent? We don't know. We're going to find out, though.
Obviously you can't hope for a better result than Al Kaline, both with his performance and then his longevity with the team, because he's synonymous with the Tigers, being a guy that stayed there for so long, didn't go to other teams, he coached in spring training for a long time as well. And McGonigal does seem like that type of guy, that very steady presence that they could probably use, because they do have a little bit of an up and down roster in general. I like the roster, but the guys do tend to swing kind of wildly, and I mean that both literally and figuratively.
No, you're right. I mean, when you're young, you have to figure it out. He just seems to have figured it out. Hopefully, he's not fooling us. I don't think he is, but he's one of those generational talents.
I agree. What else has stuck out to you? What game are you on? How many games have you seen so far, Mike?
Oh, today was the first one. We're going to go back to see Baltimore tomorrow, and then we're going to take a trip to Bradenton on Wednesday evening. The Tigers are playing the Pirates over there. So, we're going to see 3 games. So this is only game number 1 for us.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you guys are doing that. Sounds like a fun guys trip. I'm glad we could get you on the air and get a live report here, get a little baseball. We'll be going baseball basically regularly pretty much every week starting next week. So this was kind of our preview with the aptly named MLB. Aaron, I always told him that if he was NFL, he couldn't do this. He couldn't like the MLB like this if he had different initials, but thankfully they're MLB. But Mike, we appreciate you joining the show, and have fun at the other 2 games here.
We will do that. You guys take care and stay warm up there, will you?
We'll try to bring some of the sunshine back for us here.
Well, we do have a bad story. It's only supposed to be a high of 61 tomorrow, so feel a little bit bad for us.
Oh boy. Well, bring a coat or something, Mike.
There you go. I can do that.
All right. Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you, Ryan.
Thanks to Mike Baruta. We got a little live report. I like having reporters in the field. We could put you, Aaron, in the field. It would be for football, though. We would have you go to football games and do live reports. I actually was solicited to do that as I was getting the show at Jethro. I chose Jethro over that. I think I made the right choice. No offense to the person that asked me.
I agree.
Well, so for the time that we have left in this segment, though, since you do like football, your initials are not NFL, so I'm disappointed in that. But we were talking about the moves a little bit with the Lions before we went on air, and you were talking about how you're not sure about Pacheco, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I do like the Pacheco signing. This season is kind of a cruel reality for the Lions to a degree, where they've had to have some turnover of some guys that have legitimately been an important part of the team. Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, Khalif Raymond, David Montgomery. A lot of these guys have been part of their rise, but they just don't fit based on their contract amounts and their age and their production levels all combined. And Montgomery, I think that's almost as close to kind of an even situation as you can have. I think he was right to want to go somewhere else and want to get more carries. I don't think he was very bitter. He didn't seem too bitter given the situation, but to want to be a lead back when you have the qualities of a lead back, I don't think is really that out of line. They got a 4th and a 7th, which was over the projected value. Plus, they got an underrated lineman, I think, in that exchange that'll play kind of like that Evan Brown, Graham Glasgow role that they have been trying to carve out in recent years, where it's a backup center and guard. And then they got a guy that they could kind of buy low. I thought there would be some guys on the running back market. My target was Tyler Algier. I thought he would be a good fit for them, but he went for a little higher than I thought. So Pacheco was more, I think, in their price range if you're targeting maybe 8 to 10 carries for somebody, and they're hoping that, I think, in Petzing's system, he can get those one-cut runs going and get his momentum now that he's presumably healthy. But I'm curious what you think about Pacheco here, Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, ideally probably would have wanted somebody similar to Montgomery as far as size goes, someone who's more kind of complements Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more, but he's still a good running back. Honestly, I think he's not, I didn't even know he was available. But I think he'll be a good fit. And just, you hate to see Sonic and Knuckles no longer on the same team, but that was kind of the same thing when me and Steve were talking about back when they had Jamal Williams as their running back. We quickly forgot about him after Gibbs kind of became the star and David Montgomery kind of helped, be the good number 2 back.
Well, we were talking about this. We might need our video game experts, which I am not. If you take the 2-button controller out of my hand of the NES, then I'm in trouble. But I'm good with the 2-button controller with Tecmo Super Bowl with some of the kickers that Shane knows. He always brings them up on the show. But I believe, Aaron and I were talking about this, I believe the other Sonic character, the main one, is Tails. So I'm thinking that Pacheco can be Tails and fit that. I'm trying to think. There was another nickname that I liked when they were proposing Sonic and Knuckles, and that's a better fit for kind of the generation that we're in right now. But I think it was Rhythm and Bruise. Maybe they can go to that. I like that. It's a good fit with the Lions and Motown and Detroit and how R&B was so substantial there. So maybe they'll go back to that because that got vetoed in favor of Sonic and Knuckles.
Yeah, actually, I kind of like that. Honestly, it does. It is a good fit with the fact that they're in Detroit. So,
and Pacheco works well as kind of that Bruise. He will be. I think he'll fill a similar role to Montgomery. He catches well out of the backfield. He blocks well in the backfield. I think that was a huge factor for that other back. And he obviously is a kind of a one-cut runner, power runner, which is the main thing they were looking for. So it'll be interesting. They've got some other guys in tow. If we have some time at the end, we'll probably pick up the Lions discussion then. But we're going to move for now to hockey. We're going to have our friends from Hockeytown Rundown here, Zack Trathen and Carlo Mario, jump on and give us their takes on kind of the post-trade deadline. We haven't had a segment post-trade deadline really on them, and the fact that now they're picking up some injuries here. So the season's changed a little bit, but we'll get their takes on it. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to bring on these next guests here. We only got half of the full experience of the Hockeytown Rundown experience, so I'm happy that both Zach and Carlo are on from Hockeytown Rundown. And so, as you guys know, you've been on the show a few times. You always give us great information. I always celebrate the thing of the day. So I'm going to need your guys' help here because you're sports guys, but you're also hockey guys. And I'm not saying that from a derogatory standpoint, but I'm not aware of one of these people being part of any hockey events. So that may not help us with the tether here, but it's National Panda Day. And I was trying to think of a way to celebrate that. And then I was getting on this tangent, as I often do in my own head and sometimes on the air, where I was going down the path of how many pandas can I think of? You have two types of panda bear. You have the regular panda bear and then the red panda. Then you have Red Panda, the famed halftime act that balances plates and bowls and stuff on a unicycle on her head and hands and feet. And then you, of course, have Panda Express. You have the chocolate cracker combo, Hello Panda. But then I introduced this to two producers at the beginning of the show. They didn't have any clue what I was talking about. So do you guys know anything aside from, do you recognize all of those things, any of those things? I know you've heard of the Panda Bear and probably Panda Express, but do you remember Red Panda, the halftime act?
Oh yeah. And then obviously Red Panda is just in general, I guess, is one of my favorite animals. Honestly, every time I go to the zoo, those are one of my first things I want to go to. So I do remember the act that you are talking about. But in terms of trying to figure out something else that's related to hockey or just Panda in general, I think you knocked it out of the park with that one right there, buddy.
So dope. So dope.
Well, I'm glad you guys are on board. Yeah, Red Panda, I was just at the Big Ten tournament, and unfortunately they did not have Red Panda this year. I think a different tournament did, but she is a famed halftime act. So anyways, I thought it was a clever way to celebrate Panda Day, but it's like when I talked about homonyms on air, it's kind of falling flat. But anyway, we got to talk some puck because this is an interesting time frame. I'm glad you guys are the ones to kind of be the first ones to take us through the post trade deadline Red Wings era here, because they did finally make some moves. We've been talking about adding defense to this team for a while. I'm curious what you guys think of the moves, and then obviously we've got to talk about the other part, that they get more bodies, and then now we're losing some bodies.
Yeah, so I mean, where do we begin? Like, it's just such a weird time to be a Red Wings fan now, because it doesn't help that the last three seasons with the March collapse, Carl and I talked about that in our most recent episode. I mean, the Red Wings couldn't even string along what seems like 5 wins within the month of March for the last 3 seasons. But talking about the trade deadline, I think Steve Yzerman in general approached it the best way that he possibly could. He went out and got someone who could be vocal, not only on the ice and in the locker room for these boys. Obviously, they've had a tough time getting it going. And then they get another veteran guy like Justin Falk on the blue line, who comes with a bit of size, both in height and weight, and he's the highest goal scorer on that defensive blue line in general. And now he helps out the team that much more. And honestly, with the way that the center depth is now, with Larkin and Cop out, Justin Falk without him, who knows how bad this team could honestly be. I know it's really frustrating for fans right now, and I might be going into other things that you guys want to talk about too, so I do apologize about that and let Carlos speak on this. But yeah, I think Steve Yzerman handled it appropriately, and I'm very pleased with the results so far of David Perron and Justin Falk, even watching this game against the Calgary Flames right now as well. What do you think, Carlo?
Yeah, I mean, hard to follow that one. That sums it up really, really well. I mean, Steve Yzerman went out and did what he did in acquiring Justin Falk and David Perron. I love both those moves. I think we definitely needed a guy like Falk on D, and that's no secret. They desperately needed to fill a hole within their top 4, and they did that. And Falk's been incredible to watch. Just the way he plays, the way he skates, his first pass seems to be really good. If he's not himself driving it out and being part of the offensive rush. So these things are all good. And then you cue, the Cop injury, the Larkin injury, and yeah, I mean, it sucks, but you know what, guys? Like teams get injured all the time. Teams get injured all the time, and they find a way to win. Just look at the Eastern Conference that we're in right now, and who we're fighting and who we're trying to avoid being lapsed by. These guys go through injuries. Here they are. So I think that this team is put together well enough that if they really want to drive this bus, they can. And, I mean, credit to Steve Yzerman for making the move that he did, because it's definitely giving them a chance to stick around and hang on to this potential spot here.
Well, and you guys brought up the injury part. Obviously, that's a big part of this, but I want to go down at least 2 paths with this. One is I hadn't picked up on this, although I have been watching all the games and kind of realized that there really wasn't a ton of injuries on this team. Obviously, they elevated some guys from Grand Rapids with the depth there, but I believe they were by far the lowest in games missed in the first half to injury, like across the league. I think it was a large gap between first and second. So the law of large numbers, better known as the law of averages, seems to say, hey, we might pick up some injuries here, and at least right now they don't seem to be long term.
No, Cops are skating. Like, he was in a non-contact today, but he's on the ice already. And I'll be honest with you, I was the first one to say, like, when he went down and I saw him kind of pop up in pain, I'm like, oh boy, I don't know if this guy's going to see the ice, but they're hockey players, and I forgot that for a moment. These guys are tough as nails, and if you don't think that they don't want to be on the ice as quickly as possible, you're mistaken, man. Look at Perron. He's a week ahead of schedule. He saw this team going through it. And he's like, put me in, coach. And I'm pretty positive and confident that Larks and Copp are the same way. And we just got to stay patient. We got to let this team play hockey, man. This is the first time we've really gone through something like this. Forget about the month of March for a second, but going through something like this where you're losing, two predominantly good players with Todd McClellan. So I'm really curious to see how this team rallies behind Todd and how Todd rallies the troops.
Well, we talked about this, I feel like, in one of our previous interviews, how you've got to give the guys some help. Yzerman did make the call to give a pretty good addition, like we talked about with Falk and Perron, too. Both of them are good additions. One's more of a depth piece. One is towards the top of the depth chart, but he gave up some assets. He said, hey, you guys are playing well. Let me give you some reinforcements. So hopefully between that and the depth on the team, there's some guys saying, okay, yeah, we can survive this. But my other question to you guys is, obviously, Larkin is a huge loss. That doesn't really have to be said, as far as anybody that watches the Wings knows that. As far as he's the team captain, he's one of the more valuable players, one of the leading scorers, all of that stuff. But I'm curious if you guys have kind of like a top 5-ish, or where Copp would be, because I think Copp is higher than people are aware of, because like Larkin, Raymond, yeah, they lose Gibson, the starting goalie, they lose Sider, those are going to be obvious losses, but Copp, I think, sneakily is lower key a big loss.
Absolutely. And, the thing is with Andrew Copp, he's not, unfortunately, it is what it is. He's not your traditional number two centerman in the National Hockey League, who you would expect typically is going to be your 60, 70, maybe even 80-point guy, depending on how good your team is truly, based on the wingers that you're playing with and your coach and your schemes and everything else that goes into it, right? But Copp was so good for this team defensively, and it's not just looking at it from the 5-on-5 perspective. He was a really good penalty killer for this team as well. I believe he was getting time on every once in a while it would be on PP1, but I believe he was getting time on the power play too. So that takes away from all aspects of the game. And so while he might not put it up on the point production all the time, but he had a really good run playing as the 2C, and missing someone like him truly does hurt this team. And don't forget, when Larkin did go out the very next game against the New Jersey Devils, Andrew Copp had to make a step up as well. The whole team did, and they shut him out 3-0. So he's a really big piece to this team. But Carlo could even attest to this. I've been on record saying if we can bump Andrew Copp down to a 3C spot and upgrade him, go ahead and do that. But right now, I can see why Steve didn't upgrade, because Andrew Copp was that serviceable guy for us right now. And hopefully in the future as well, because we still have him for next season. So hopefully he can come back sooner than later, and it all looks super promising right now.
What do you think, Carlo?
Well, is Andrew Copp in my top 5? To answer that head on, I'm going to say yeah. When it comes to the forward group, absolutely. And that's strictly because he's a centerman. It's a very important position. They're expensive for the reason. But it's just the way he plays. And I don't know if you guys have ever caught Andrew Copp post-game, but, if you have the time, I highly recommend, jumping on YouTube, going to the Red Wings YouTube page and finding a post-game or even a post-practice interview that Andrew Kopp is a part of. You will see very quickly why this guy is missed on the ice, but even in the room. That guy's going to be a hell of a hockey coach one day. After his career is done, I'm marking it right now, he's going to be a hell of a coach probably in the NHL. He's just got such a great mind for the game. So I guess to answer your question, like I said, head on, he's absolutely in my top 5 out of the forward group for this team. And I think when he comes back, which it seems like it'll be a little bit sooner than Lark's, I think it's going to be noticeable for sure. Just the way the team slots, but of course even the penalty kill, the power play, you're going to notice Kopp when he's back in the lineup for sure.
You're not the first, Carlo, to bring up his future in coaching. I think a lot of people see that with him because it's kind of the juxtaposition with him, I guess, to a degree of what you guys are talking about. I can see the reslotting of those centers because we talked about this before the trade deadline, how you either can go top down or build some depth, and they kind of did both. They went more top down with Falk and filled in a higher end option and then slotted everybody else down on the defense. And then with Perron, he more attached to the backside and gave some toughness and depth and experience to kind of the backside of that area. But I'm not necessarily in disagreement with Zach about the fact that they could probably slot another center behind Larkin. I thought that was maybe going to be one of their strategies to get somebody other than Kopp, and then because he just becomes stronger. He's still going to play a good amount, and he just becomes more valuable if he's the third line center, kind of as you were highlighting, Zach.
You know, and I said it this way. If you can get, because the Red Wings had multiple needs. Some would say maybe it was only one. Some might say it was 2. Others might say it was 3. Honestly, there were multiple different angles Steve Yzerman could approach this. I mean, we got to remember, too, in the offseason, he went out and got John Gibson. That was a need that he filled, right? So that was very early on. He then had to move on from Jonathan Berggren at some point throughout the season, and now he just did that with Elmer Soderblom, moved over to the Pittsburgh Penguins for a third. That pick went involved in Justin Falk's deal. And Steve Yzerman clearly recognized that our top 4 defense just needed that extra boost ASP. While it was really fun to see him in his time here playing on a regular basis, you could tell that he was being heavily sheltered, and we needed that extra body that could come in and play 20 minutes night in, night out. I do agree, though, he getting a center, every playoff team going into the playoffs should always be ready for depth because injuries just happen, and that could make or break either your playoff run or even trying to make the playoffs, and we're currently seeing that with the Red Wings. So he could have gotten a center, but you look at the cost of Justin Falk. So Steve Yzerman went about it on the defensive end before the injuries. Unfortunately, Steve Yzerman doesn't have that crystal ball to know that these injuries are going to happen. Can you prepare for them? Yeah, but you look at the team now, you got Emmett Finney now playing as the number 2 center. So a lot of these wingers that we've had on the wing can play center. So now they're getting their opportunities, and for Steve Yzerman and Tom McClellan to see what they potentially could use in these players in the future if this hopefully doesn't happen again. We don't want this to happen again, but could he have gotten that centerman? Yes. Did he? No. Is that unfortunate? I think he played it the right way. Going and getting everything that you want in one trade deadline is really going to break your bank.
And they really weren't on the precipice of, okay, we're 1 or 2 moves away from the finals. You guys have talked about
Correct.
this. You've got to build towards that. So right now the goal is playoffs. Then you progress through the playoffs. You break that playoff drought, and then you go from there. But I want to talk to you. We'll take a quick break here in a second, but I want to talk to you about the the possible guys that could fill in. You talked about Finney, but there's a lot of depth on this team. We've been hearing a ton about Grand Rapids because they're here local, playing very well. So we've seen a couple guys get pulled up, but I'm curious what you think of some of the young guys that may get pulled up, or not so young guys. But we'll come back with Zach and Carlo of Hockeytown Rundown. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to come back here with the guys from Hockeytown Rundown. I'm curious, guys, because this whole thing, one of the names that I was hearing, and you guys have more sources and ears to the street on this stuff than I do, but one of the names that I wouldn't have been surprised to hear moved out of the young guys, if they did have to move a young guy, was Nate Danielson. And now he's hurt. I can't help but look at this team and think, because we follow all the sports here, we're going to be covering Pistons in the last segment, but he reminds me of Jaden Ivey. If we had to do an SAT comparison, I would go Jaden Ivey was to the Pistons as Nate Danielson is to the Red Wings, in my mind anyways. But I'm curious what you guys think of this, because, and you may not follow a ton of basketball, but Ivey was a high pick. He clearly had a lot of talent. He had some injuries and some things that threw off his trajectory, and it wasn't really matching the rest of the team. The train kind of left the station without him, and everybody else was playing well together and had good cohesion and synergy. And it was clear that from his body language that he just didn't feel like he fit in. It wasn't like he was a bad apple or anything like that. It just, he was not feeling good about both his health and his fit on the team. I kind of get that vibe from Danielson, even though that's harder to see in hockey, and he hasn't been up much. And I don't like to get out early on these guys, because I'm usually one saying, hey, we got to give the young guys a shot. But I'm also disappointed at the same time, because this is the time to see what Danielson has, and now he's hurt too, and he could be one of the fill-ins here.
Yeah, I think with Nate Danielson, just to start with his time in Grand Rapids, and to your point, he is still currently injured. He's not back in the lineup, and he's only played 18 games with them, but he's got 15 points. So that's pretty close to a point-per-game player with them. You do have to be wary of injuries, obviously, with hockey players, because you never know if that's going to carry down the road in his career or what's going on with him. But when it comes to Nate Danielson, Carlo, I was on record saying this too, that I would not be surprised if maybe in the offseason we could see Steve Yzerman packaging up Nate Danielson or Marco Kasper in a deal to upgrade to someone who is younger than Andrew Kopp, slightly older than them, who can come in and be that number 2 centerman for us. But I could be very wrong. We do potentially have a spot for a number 4 center next season, and that could be Nate Danielson's spot. He played 28 games with us this season. 7 points in those 28 games really isn't that bad. He's got to have a really strong offseason. I do think that there is a lot of GMs out there that would be interested in a Nate Danielson, but obviously the return back has to be worth it for the Detroit Red Wings, and more than likely it would have to be another center, and you would probably have to add on top of Nate Danielson, depending on who that is. But I like what Nate Danielson brings. I think he could be a really great center in the NHL. Some people think as high as a 2C, some maybe not as high as we are. Kind of like you said, too, on the Jaden Ivey front, and I do pay a little bit of attention to the Detroit Pistons, too. And, yeah, you're correct. You got to be very careful with how you approach it. But Steve Yzerman, look, he hasn't moved any of his first-round picks that he's drafted. He's only traded away the first-round picks that he's never used. So he really likes the players that he's gotten, and maybe it's an old Red Wings mind thing where they just love to stay loyal to their players as well and give them those opportunities. I'm not sure, but what do you think about that, Carlo?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I definitely can see the parallels between Danielson and Ivy. But the thing is that, I would selfishly like to hang on to a Nate Danielson because, our bottom 6, I'm sure you guys have heard the term thrown around as of late. There's hockey players on this team, and then there's And I don't think Nate Danielson, when he's healthy and he's playing and he's acclimated, is a jersey. I think that guy's a difference maker. He's a gamer. We always go back to, I believe it was Connor Bedard who even said the same thing about Danielson. He's one of the hardest opponents he's ever played against in his junior career. So, I mean, these things count for something. But when I look at our bottom six right now and I see Nate Danielson ready, no pun intended, but waiting in the wings, I selfishly want to keep him for our bottom six, specifically a 3C. That's selfishly. Now, if we can move Danielson and package him up, because it's not going to be a 1-for-1, like it's going to require a package, and we can go and get ourselves like a bona fide 2C, that needs to be explored as well, because Andrew Kopp, I think, would thrive, just like you guys said. He would be stronger when he's downshifted, essentially. So I think that it's a hard one to really judge. Has the train left the station with the Red Wings? Not exactly. So, I mean, Danielson still belongs here. He still has business here. The train really hasn't left the station yet. I mean, look where we're at currently. So I don't know. I hope that answers it. But Danielson's one I just don't know about yet because I haven't really seen a huge sample size from him yet. I think exactly was it 28 games, decent sample size, but then he went down. Now he's injured. Like, I want to see him play, and I want to see him progress through at least half a season just to kind of see where he's at and what he's doing. But I think he could be a sneaky good player for our bottom six as soon as possible. Because I assume as soon as he's healthy again, they're probably going to call him up.
That's one reason that he does parallel with Ivy a little bit for me, because I always was a believer in Ivy. I still am. I don't know what's going on with his knee. That's the one question there. I don't know what his health is like now. The Bulls are kind of toying with shutting him down, it looks like. So he might need some strengthening of that knee. But from a pure talent standpoint, it was somewhat similar that he got thrown off by the fact that he wasn't necessarily able to get in the flow with everybody. And I agree, Carlo, on the fact that the train hasn't left the station for good. It's more that the guys seemed to kind of leave without him, and then he was trying to run to catch up. That's how I felt with Ivy, because Ivy had his chance with the Pistons where Cade went down for 6 games, and then that's when we had the Danis Jenkins explosion, and he got to benefit from that. If Ivy had been in that spot, I feel like maybe we would have seen what he was capable of, just like we saw what Danis is capable of. Same thing with Danielson right now. It would have been nice to see him pulled up and put in a little bit more of a pressure situation to see what they have in him, because they do have these games now with both of those, with Larkin and Kopp out. So that was more the parallel. But he is an interesting one, because it's like one thing makes you think he's like right at the Mendoza line. One thing makes you think, okay, yeah, maybe he can stay with this team long term, and then another piece of data comes and you're like, well, maybe not. I don't know. But he is young, and that's the thing that we all have to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. It's an interesting one to watch and follow, because, if there's one thing Steve Yzerman probably learned for sure, because it's easy for us, to watch these games and to watch these injuries happen and then play the hindsight role. But, he's got to be thinking the same stuff. It's like, wow, we really are thin at center. Like, this is something I would imagine got to be high on his priority list for the offseason. And it's gonna cost. He's got to get creative, because the UFA pool is not great. Not at all. Like, I don't think there's one player on there I was like, oh, that'd be nice. You know what I mean? So it's going to take some creativity for sure, and I would expect it to be addressed one way or another, whether that's with Danielson part of this potential hypothetical deal or not, and something else comes about. But it'll be interesting to follow.
Definitely. How do you guys feel about this team on the way out here? How do you feel about the team going forward here? They've got the injuries, they've got the additions at the trade deadline, and they're right in the middle of a lot of parity in that division and conference. So I'm curious what the expectation is for the rest of the year.
stay as positive as you possibly can because it's going to be a bumpy ride. They are now down 1-0 at the end of the first intermission against the Calgary Flames, one of the worst teams in the league right now that should be trying to go after Gavin McKenna. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but try to stay as optimistic as you possibly can. But expectations, Carlo, we said it. Most fans, we did a poll. If they went 10-10 in their last 20 games, that they would not make the playoffs. And Carlo and I slightly agree with them. They have to be at least a 600 team or better in order to make the playoffs. What else should you add in there, Carlo?
That's it. They need to be a 600 team, and it's not because of them. It's not because of their schedule. It's because of everybody around them. Man. Everybody around them scored. Everybody around them keeps on winning. They need to be a 600 team in order to break through this and get past this. You know, the one thing I'll leave you guys with, and I'll ask this to you guys, post-Olympic break, and I'll come back to my point driver here, but post-Olympic break, who do you think has the most shots on goal on the Detroit Red Wings since they came back from the Olympics?
Go ahead, Zach. What do you think?
I already know the answer.
Oh.
What was my guess? I think at first I guessed Seider, and I guessed one or two other players like Emmett Finney. And so, Carlo, who was it?
It was Moritz Seider. Moritz Seider currently has the most shots on goal on the Detroit Red Wings since coming back from the Olympic break. This is really, really good news for Seider. This is really, really bad news for the Detroit Red Wings. You got 12 forwards. You got 6 of them that are playing top 6, eating those minutes, and you're not shooting the puck. That's the biggest thing right now that they need to figure out. Lucas Raymond's not shooting the puck. DeBrincat, he's shooting. He's starting to shoot more. Kane, he's been pass first. Kane's been an interesting story this year. We just need to see the guys that need to step up to start stepping up. And part of that process is shooting the puck. I think if they can do that and they can get in front of a goalie's eyes and just play fundamental hockey. Keep it simple, play fundamental hockey, and get pucks to the net. You can't get more cliche than that. They're going to give themselves a chance. Is it enough to get to a 600 record? I don't know. Without Larkin and Kopp, that is going to be very difficult. We got 5 games coming up against divisional opponents, and this is going to be a make or break 10 days for the Detroit Red Wings and the 2026 playoffs. So it'll be a fun one, boys. Cross those fingers.
That's a great tease to leave it on, and hopefully we will have some extra games here, so we can have you back on maybe towards a playoff run. But I want to make sure to direct people where they can find you here.
Where can you find us? You can find us on pretty much any social media platform under either the app symbol of Hockeytown Rundown or Hockeytown RD, stands for Rundown. You want to watch or listen to our takes, our podcast, you can find us on YouTube under that same handle, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Me personally, Zack Trathen. You can find me at Zack Trathen. HTRD, Hockeytown Rundown. That's on Twitter. That's what we primarily use, Twitter X. I'm old. I still call it Twitter. Elon's going to sue me here eventually, I'm sure. But, Carlo, where could everyone find you?
Yeah, if you're not finding me on the Hockeytown Rundown page, you can definitely find me on X. The handle is @DrumLion. That is my handle. That's where I'm at. Hit me up. Send me a DM. I love talking shop. Love talking hockey. Love talking wings. And I'll be waiting. Hit me up.
Definitely be sure to follow these guys. There's great stuff. I'm with you, Zach. X is not as easy to. It doesn't necessarily exemplify what it is as well as Twitter did. And there's a Mitch Hedberg bit. I don't know if you're familiar with his comedic work, but he has a whole bit about X marking the spot and being part of tic-tac-toe. So I think they just needed another thing for X to do. I think that's why they made it X, but it makes everything more confusing. But no, great stuff, guys. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll look forward to having you back on in the future.
I look forward. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
All right, See you guys. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Thanks to the Hockeytown Rundown guys there, Zach and Carlo. Great stuff. We're going to turn our attention to our next guest because he's already texted me. He's ready to go. He was a local talent, Justin Jennings. He played at Grand Rapids Central, great player here. He went on to play at Purdue with current coach Matt Painter, and I think he's very excited to talk because his team won the Big Ten tournament that Mom and I went to, so we're excited to talk to him about his interesting career and background and his Boilermakers as well in the Big Ten as a whole now going into March Madness. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. I'm excited about this next guest because we talk about, ways of finding intel on this show and sources. And this is a very well-timed interview because I'd like to say, Justin, that I planned having a Purdue alum on that played on the team and played with Matt Painter. And after winning the Big Ten tournament, but I can't claim to be that good. I'm just happy to have you on the show to talk about your career and talk about your Boilermakers because they are hot right now.
Oh, yeah, that was a big win yesterday. My family, I have a family full of Michigan fans, so it was really, really nice yesterday to be able to pull that one out.
Well, I try to be as objective as I can on the show. As I've told you previously, I am an IU grad. I don't know how you feel about this, Justin, but since I was born in Michigan and raised in Michigan like you were, I didn't really get into the IU-Purdue rivalry. I don't mean that as downplaying Purdue. I just didn't. It wasn't like in my veins like some of the other rivalries. So I don't know you,
Right.
But you played against Indiana, so you probably had a little bit more ire for us Hoosiers.
Maybe a little, but I like you because I'm from Michigan. It's not the same for somebody like us, but definitely going to IU and playing at IU and being at Purdue, it's a huge rivalry, and it got to be a little ugly sometimes, but definitely a huge rivalry.
Well, I'm more likely to make fun of the IU fan base. Just FYI, I'm not going to be a pro IU guy for the most part because I was there. So I was there Mike Davis's first year, the year that we went to the finals, where they transitioned from Bobby Knight to Mike Davis over that summer. And I remember some of those things. I would have courtside seats because part of the season pass was you got courtside seats at least once. And some of the things they were yelling at these players, they played Luke Recker, who had transferred away from IU and didn't want to play for Bobby Knight. And I don't know about you, Justin. I never got recruited for anything. So you did, and you had some good colleges after you. I saw an interview talking about some of the colleges that were after you, and I want to talk about that. But I don't think I would have wanted to play for Bobby Knight. I'll put it that way. And so there were guys that transferred away from him, and some of these things that the IU fans were saying because he transferred away, I thought, I don't think you'd want to play for Bobby Knight either, IU fan.
No, I don't. I wouldn't have not wanted to play for him, but I got a chance to know Bobby Knight and Pat pretty good, and they were. Bobby was a great guy. I mean, he was a nice guy. Let me say, nice guy. So, but that's good. As a matter of fact, I told you when we were texting back and forth, my Bobby Knight story is like my senior year. I was actually honorable mention All Big Ten coming off the bench from Purdue, and the person who nominated me for All Big Ten was Bobby Knight. Now, not a lot of people know that, but we played. I think my final game that we played at Assembly Hall, I had either 18 or 20 points, and all of them were dunks. So his philosophy was like anybody who can dunk 9 or 10 times should be first team. Should be on the Big Ten, All Big Ten team. So I did. I was on honorable mention All Big Ten because he nominated me. And, for somebody from Purdue, that's not something you would probably normally see.
Well, I will give him credit on that because there are I've read a lot about Bobby Knight. I never actually got the chance to meet him, but I read a lot on him as I was going to IU, and he's a very intriguing figure in general and a very, very pivotal figure in college basketball. But he did have his good traits as far as I do think he was good at identifying talent and elevating said talent. So to be chosen by Bobby Knight, that's a pretty big compliment.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's such a misnomer about how Coach Knight and Coach Katie hated each other, because they didn't at all. I mean, they golfed and did stuff in the summer on the circuit, and it was always interesting to see how people thought that how they hated each other so bad. But their rivalry wasn't like that. I think that was just for show.
Exactly. Well, and Knight's always going to look like he's angry at somebody, so you're going to just assume it's his rival there. But I saw an interview with you. It was an older interview because the footage was very grainy. I don't know what year it was, but it was a news interview on a local, I believe a local news outfit on the east side. But they were talking about how you were recruited by Purdue and a couple other schools. So it sounds like one of the schools you were talking about too.
Right. I mean, I was recruited by Purdue, Michigan State, even Michigan. At the end, I decided to go to Purdue before, during the first signing. But even after I, verbally committed to Purdue, I had a lot of offers, and a lot of schools, let me say this the right way, a lot of schools backed away from me, because when I went to summer camp, like 5-star and those things, I always had on Michigan State stuff. So a lot of coaches just assumed. As a matter of fact, I had a coach when I was being recruited. He was kind of like, hey, yeah, people are laying off you because everybody, they know you're going to Michigan State. And I was like, what? So I had to kind of reestablish that I hadn't chosen a school before I actually chose Purdue. And I just chose Purdue because I didn't want to be so close to home where that everybody would be all around and asking for tickets and all those things. So that's why I chose Purdue, because it was far enough away from home that I could grow a little bit, but it was still close enough I could get back to see my folks. I'm a mama's boy, so that was a priority for me.
Well, my mom's in studio with me, so I believe I'd be in the same category there. I was kind of the same way too with Indiana. Indiana's a little further south from Grand Rapids, but it was the same way. Like, hey, this is a weekend trip back. You could come back on the weekend and see the family and come back for any family related things. But that's interesting that you got recruited from those other schools. So that would have been. So who was recruiting you at that time then? So obviously Katie, who you ended up playing for, and then Judd Heathcote?
Judd Heathcote.
And Michigan State.
Judd Heathcote was at Michigan State when I was being recruited, yeah. But at the time, it was right about the time where he basically, let me say this, part of the other reason I didn't go to Michigan State, because he was like, hey, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to be here your whole time. And at the time, nobody really knew of Izzo. He was just his assistant. So, and I wouldn't have gone or not gone to the school because of that, but it did play a factor in there. But it was hard because I was a huge, and still am, I love him. He lives here in Atlanta with me now. I was a huge Steve Smith fan, and I would have loved to be able to just go to the school just because of Steve Smith, but it just wasn't the right fit for me.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people, this is where retrospect is important, because a lot of people would go, wait, you didn't want to play for Tom Izzo? Tom Izzo wasn't what Tom Izzo is now when you were getting recruited. Nobody knew about him. Yeah, sure, he was a promising assistant coach, but that was about it, and that can go any direction.
Right. As a matter of fact, when I was getting recruited, I had never met Tom Izzo. Stan Joplin was the person who recruited me along with Judd Heathcote. So I never even met Coach Izzo until I got to Purdue and we played against him. So
that's interesting. So who else do we have? We have Arizona.
Arizona, yeah.
Was that Lute Olson at the time?
Lute was there, yep. And Ohio State, I think Randy Ayers was there. And in my mind, I'm a kid from Grand Rapids. I always wanted to go to Syracuse, but they didn't recruit me until pretty much the end. Pretty much when I was done doing everything, and everything was, recruiting was pretty much over. I had committed to Purdue, and I had already signed my letter of intent with them at that time.
Come on, Jim Boeheim. Justin would have worked great in the zone defense there. Come on, Come on, Coach Boeheim. Yeah. Why did you want to go to Syracuse?
Just growing up, I just always loved, I loved the way that they played. I loved the speed of it, and it seemed like it would have just been the right fit. A guy like me, jump in, long arms, and playing in the zone. I just thought that would be just a great fit.
That it does sound like it, and I mean, it is impressive how many great all-time coaches did recruit you. I mean, that's a pretty lofty list as far as who did recruit you. Katie, obviously, being the one that you played for, but then Heathcote and Lute Olson. That's kind of a who's who, and then Boeheim, I guess, at the end, but. But that's that's pretty cool stuff. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then I want to come back and talk about your squad because you played with Matt Painter, who was the heir apparent to your coach, Gene Cady, and his coach. And I want to talk about their squad and then your backstory as well. So we'll come back with Dr. Justin Jennings. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM.
From the GarbarinoRoofs.com studios.
Country with a twist. Jethro FM. 1530 AM. WYGR Wyoming Grand Rapids. 94.9 FM Grand Rapids. 99.5 FM Lowell. And Jethro South. 980 AM WAKV Otsego Plainwell. 98.9 FM Otsego. And 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
Coming back here with former Boilermaker Dr. Justin Jennings. I'm having a good conversation about his career. And I wanted to kind of go back to the beginning here because the piece that I did watch that was from the fuzzy outlet from the past on the Detroit side, I assume, was about kind of your interesting backstory that you ended up being recruited to all these places that we talked about. And you obviously, I introduced you as Dr. Jennings. You have your doctorate, you have your PhD. You've been very accomplished with what you've done with your education. But I want to kind of take people through, because part of the reason we do these long form interviews is to talk about, I think sometimes we put athletes on a pedestal and say, oh, well, they had it easy or nothing was ever hard for them. And that's never really the case. All of you guys went through something and had to power through a difficulty in life. And I find your story interesting because when you went to college, I think people sometimes have the perception, okay, well, they're a student athlete and maybe it's sometimes more athlete than student. I was on the floor with a lot of IU football players and they were home a lot. I'll tell you that. And then they were out at night. But you know, a lot of the guys work very hard, guys and gals. But I wanted people to know your backstory of kind of what you had to do in college, put a little extra work in to make sure you got where you needed to go from the education side of things.
Absolutely. I guess the irony, I don't want to jump off this, but the irony from yesterday is I actually got my doctorate from the University of Michigan. So,
oh, okay.
I wasn't torn, but you know that's one of those things that I always think like, hey, who do you really root for? I mean, do you root for undergrad or do you root for grad? But you know, I'm a Boilermaker through and through. But you know, I was a struggling reader growing up, and when I got to college, you know, I was reading at a third grade level, and I had to do I had to get a lot of help and do a lot of work to, you know, get to where I am today or where I am from having a doctorate. I actually have I have my bachelor's. I got my bachelor's from Purdue University. I did finish and graduate school. And then I have 3 master's degrees from Grand Valley, and I also have my ed specialist, and I have my doctorate. So it's, you know, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Well, I'm feeling very inferior here, Dr. Jennings, but no, that is very impressive that you've just then continued to learn. It was like once you kind of got on that learning path, you just continued to want to learn. Is there a goal in mind, or are you just kind of a lifelong learner?
Well, you know, when I stopped playing basketball, I got into education. I'm not sure if you knew, but I got into education. So that piece that you saw, I was from Ruben Juarez, and it was actually WOTV. I was actually his sister's principal at Union High School.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that piece came about. And his sister was really special to me because what happened was I used to see her every day as a principal, and she was always by herself, never really talked. And then one day I said something, and I always said hi to her, and she kind of said hi. But one day I stopped and I talked to her. And what happened was she was like, hey, if you wouldn't have stopped and talked to me today, I was thinking about killing myself. So that's kind of – so when I met Ruben, I didn't know that happened to be his sister. So the connection in the article, I mean, in the news story was really more than what people really realized. So that was kind of my connection to Ruben.
Interesting. Yeah, it was a great piece. Yeah, I couldn't tell what year it was from. You know, you're watching it kind of like on YouTube and all of that. Now, are you still in education? Are you still working in education, or what are you up to now?
So I actually retired as a superintendent. I was a superintendent in Muskegon. I went to Youngstown, and I was a CEO, and I was a superintendent in Youngstown, and then I retired. So now I live in Atlanta. My wife and I live in Atlanta, and I actually have my own business. I do educational consulting, and I work for a company called an organization called A Long Talk. It's basically what we do is we go around the country and we try to activate people to be anti-racist.
Well, that's a great cause. Yeah, they can't have enough help for that particular cause. Well, that's good that you're at least taking a little bit of a break, and maybe you'll pick up a few more degrees along the way too in your retirement. No, you're done with that? Okay, well, you got enough already anyways. Your wall's filled here. You can't put any more up on the wall. I didn't know that you'd gone to Michigan see, it's different for you because you actually played for Purdue. That's a difference. You know, if you went to both, then maybe you could say, hey, I like one better, and didn't play it either, but you played at Purdue. I want to talk about your Purdue squad though here, because the one really good way to get intel in this interview is you actually have, a close personal connection with their head coach, who I think is very underrated. I think Matt Painter, because he followed Gene Cady in what was already a good program. There's been some other powerhouse coaches in the Big Ten, including Tom Izzo, who's been there forever, that we talked about earlier in the interview. And I think Matt Painter kind of gets lost in the shuffle. He's just consistently very, very good, but because of his demeanor or because it's Purdue, I don't know what it exactly is, but I think he's underrated. So I'm curious about your take on both Painter and the team in general this year.
Well, Matt was a senior when I was a freshman. He was a lone senior when I was a freshman, which was the opposite of me because I was one of 6 freshmen. So when I graduated, I was one of 6 seniors. But Matt was he was there for a second, and it seemed like he was gone, but he was always around. And Matt, you could tell when Matt was on the floor as a player, because he was our point guard my freshman year, and Matt was he had that eye for the game. So a crazy Matt story. So we always played pickups, and I used to do this move. I don't know if it was made famous by Earl Monroe and Earl the Pearl, and I used to always. It's called a Kentucky roll, and Matt started guarding me because he knew I was going to always do the Kentucky roll if somebody got in my way. So that was kind of my beginning of Matt coaching for me because we started playing pickup, and he kept ripping me. I'm like, dang, and he says, Jennings, you got to stop doing that move because that's all you do. So that was that was me a freshman and Matt was a senior, and that was kind of my introduction to, Matt kind of being a coach. And then from there, he kind of, spent a little time like, hey, you can do this. And so it was a little different, but Matt's a great guy. And as far as coaching, Matt's a player's coach. Matt will see that his team is not doing well, and he's like, hey, everybody, let's shower and dress. We're going to the movies. That's the type of coach he is. So it's not, and he knows his X's and O's, and he also knows to surround himself with great people. I've played for great coaches, not just Coach Cady. I think one of the most underrated coaches, one of the greatest coaches I ever coached was my assistant coach, which was Bruce Weber. And Bruce went on to Illinois. He went on to Kansas State, and he was a great coach, great with X's and O's, and great with players. And as a matter of fact, I may get the college wrong, but I think he started off at either Southwest Missouri State or Missouri State is where Coach started off, Coach Weber. And when he left to go to Illinois, that's where Painter took over for him because Painter was his assistant. So that was kind of the role of Painter and the role of Coach Weber as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought I remembered Coach Weber starting in Illinois, but at Southern Illinois.
Southern Illinois. Yeah, I got it. That's right, Southern Illinois. And Painter took over for him. Southwest Missouri State is where Conzo is right now. That's my bad.
Oh, okay. Quanzo Martin's over there?
Yeah, he went back. So that's where he started. And he started at Southern Illinois, and now he was at Southwest Missouri State. Now he's back there. He went from there to he was at Cal Berkeley and then Tennessee, and now he's back at Southwest Missouri State again.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, you played with some great players because I was looking at the rosters. You obviously got Painter, but then Quanzo Martin, and then of course one of the biggest Purdue names of all time, the big dog, Glenn Robinson. And but yeah, Painter, especially your experience with him, that you played with him under Weber. I remember him, great coach, and Weber and Katie. Painter, all on the same team. I'm wondering, I kind of have a succession plan in mind here because it's got to be hard for you to look at this current team and not see a future coach in their point guard, in their senior point guard again here, like Matt Painter was for Katie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so, but I think he's going to be able to play at the next level. I mean, watching them play. And just watching him play, even yesterday, was just amazing. You know how he can control the game with the dribble, with the assist. I mean, and he can score on anybody, as we saw yesterday, any size. I think that's really. Definitely, hopefully, he'll be a coach in the future, but definitely he has some time. He's going to play at the next level.
Oh, I agree with you there. I'm a huge Braden Smith guy. I told you when we were texting before the interview that I like Purdue's brand of basketball a lot better than Indiana's this year, specifically because of Smith and then Painter at the helm, and he's such an extension of Painter. But yeah, it was fun to watch them play all the way through because Clough is playing a lot better. Lawyer is hot. They've got a good team there, and with Smith leading them, it's kind of hard to count them out. They're going to be a very tough out, and they played their way up to a 2. So you guys have a good shot here in the tournament. What do you think you guys are going to do?
I think they'll go far in the tournament. The only if is they can't have a defensive slide like they did in the season. So my brother and I were going back and forth yesterday, and it's not like they lost 8 games in a row. They lost 3 games in a row, and if you look at the way that they were playing, they just weren't playing great defense. And I think that's something that they have to continue to play great defense if the players aren't hot. But if they shoot like they shot yesterday, I think they can make a deep run.
Definitely. And yeah, they do. Their intensity level was very high through the tournament, and I think they've got the right lineup now for that. I think the rotation is hitting its peak here, so it'll be interesting to see. I was so close, Justin. We were in the building for that finals game. I needed 2 more shots to be hit so that I could have been in the building for Braden breaking the all-time assist record here.
Right. I was hoping too, because I actually was driving, so I was listening to the game on my phone. So I was excited I was hoping he got it as well.
Yeah, he's close. At least he put himself in position where if he stays healthy, the first game, even if they only have 1 game as a 2 seed, they probably are likely to have more than 1, but he'll likely break it the next game here. So that'll be cool. He deserves it. It's an impressive record and career that he's had. But I really appreciate you coming on and talking some Purdue, talking about your story. Well, we've got more stories to talk about. I feel like we didn't even talk about some of the players you played with. So I'd love to have you back on at some point in time. But is there anywhere we can direct people to these organizations that you're still a part of to help some of the things you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, our website for the organization is alongtalk.com, and you can get on there and you can, if you want us to come out to organization, we work with all the Big Ten schools, BYU, UPenn is huge with us, a lot of private schools, a lot of country day schools. So we work with a lot of schools, a lot of school systems, and it would anything we can do to kind of spread the word to get people to just love on each other would be great. And definitely we have to get back on and tell some more stories, because I got some Brian Cardinal and some Brad stories to tell as well.
Oh, man, you got me with Brian Cardinal. I knew about Brad. I didn't think of Brian Cardinal, and there's got to be some stories with that guy and Brad Miller, too.
Oh, yeah.
There's a bunch of them. Yeah, I made sure to look up the rosters, but, yeah, even with 30 minutes, we ran out of time here. But I appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely look forward to having you back on here.
All right, thanks. Have a good one.
All right, thanks. You too. Thanks to Dr. Justin Jennings. Appreciate him coming on. That was great stuff. Yeah, I'd love to talk about some of the stories from the old days with some of those guys he mentioned. A lot of big names. I think Quanzo Martin ended up playing in Grand Rapids here for the Hoops/Mackers. I was going to look that up, but I remember him being in town. But now he's a prominent coach, and a lot of big names, big NBA names that we talked about in that interview. But we're gonna stick with the NBA here. We're gonna turn our attention to the Pistons and talk with our buddy Bryce Simon about the Pistons and kind of where they are in the season now and what he thinks of the trade deadline acquisition and where they're headed. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy to bring on this next guest. He's one of our favorites to cover the Pistons, and I'm just realizing now that I didn't ask our last guest this, but I think Bryce is a good one to ask this. He knows I like to celebrate the thing of the day. Oftentimes it's food related. I couldn't get a food one for us, Bryce, but it's National Panda Day. And you being a big basketball guy, you're a huge basketball guy. I know you're going to know some of the versions of Panda because I got lost in the first segment with two producers here talking about the different types of panda, because you obviously got the two panda bears, the regular one and the red panda. Then you have Red Panda, the famed halftime act. Tell me you have to be a Red Panda fan.
So this is funny. I didn't know who that was until 2 or 3 months ago. I think I was recording Game Theory and Sam Vecini made the reference to Red Panda, or maybe somebody commented that she was doing the halftime show or something. And I very sillily just said, well, who's that? And obviously just got cooked because I didn't know who it was. And so now I'm very familiar with who she is and what she does and how famous she is for her halftime shows at NBA games.
Well, that's funny that you just learned about this. You're not the only one, by the way, either. But I've been to a lot of, like, we went to the Big Ten tournament this past week. She wasn't at the Big Ten tournament. She was at a different conference tournament. I don't remember which one, SEC or ACC. But she is pretty famous. But it's like you're not necessarily watching the halftime shows of these games. You're covering the games in a different way.
So, Ryan, I can't tell you the last time I sat through any part of halftime. Like I usually purposely will start a game late so that way I can just fast forward through those 15 minutes. So whenever I'm watching on NBA League Pass, we get to the end of the second quarter, I see what the time is on the scroll bar or whatever, add 15 minutes to it, click there, and then I got the third quarter geared up, ready to go. And then quite frankly, I live so far away from an NBA arena, I make one, maybe like this year I'll probably make 2 NBA games. I went to the Nuggets-Pistons game, and then I plan on coming out to Detroit here in about a month for game 1 of the first round.
Gotcha. Well, I'm glad you're going to make a playoff game because we expect some good playoff runs here. But I do the same thing, by the way. I don't. Since I don't usually even watch them live because of the show schedule, I usually fall behind and then have to catch them up and then just fast forward through the in between stuff. And then I read your recaps to help along. I did that with the Raptors game here, but I'm curious what you think of this point in the season, because I feel like people are getting a little bit down on them after the trade deadline and after the All-Star break. But the people that follow this team knew that it was a difficult schedule coming out of the break. They've had some injuries to deal with. They've got one player leaving, one player arriving. I'm curious what you think now. Now we've actually gotten some Kevin Huerter minutes to monitor a little bit, because at the beginning we didn't really. I wanted to talk about him right away, and it was like, oh well, the first week he didn't really play at all.
Yeah, it's kind of okay. So first thing is, I think my biggest thing for them is just keep the 1 seed, and ultimately, we've had this conversation on the Pistons polls. I think Omari's even asked JB about it. And, JB said he's not really worried about it, and they shouldn't be. I think that was actually the quote that got misconstrued on social media, that JB somehow disrespected the Celtics, saying that they weren't worried about the Celtics whenever whatever site it was didn't give the full quote in terms of, we got to be focused on us. We're not worried about the Celtics or whoever's behind us. But I think there was even something Omari had asked him about the 1 seed in general, and I think JB kind of, you're going to play a good team regardless. I do think that there is something psychologically, and maybe it's just as somebody on the outside, that it would be nice to see them finish off this regular season with the 1 seed, not give up this 4 or 5 game lead that they've had over the Celtics. And sneaky enough right now, the Knicks are right there, the Cavs are right there. I'm actually in the middle of watching a Hawks Magic game. Neither of those teams are going to make their run to there, but those teams are 2 of the most successful teams over the last 10 games in the NBA. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is getting people healthy. Asar Thompson returned to the lineup in that Raptors game, see what's going to go on with Isaiah Stewart. And then finally, and this probably is the most important, Ryan, is like, what is the rotation? I think post-trade deadline and roster finalization in terms of adding Dennis Jenkins to the 15-man, I think we all just assumed Dennis was going to be a part of the 10-man rotation come playoff time, or a 9-man rotation. Ryan, he didn't play in an 11-man rotation last night for the Pistons. And as you mentioned, Kevin Huerter comes in the Jaden Ivey trade. Doesn't look like he's going to be part of it. Now the past few games he has been, and his shot diet in general is what I think can potentially help this team. So I'm interested to see how some of those off-the-bench rotation things play out over the next month.
Well, one of the things with Huerter that occurred to me with the trade deadline and how it played out, I don't think anybody really had this particular iteration. I was starting to get on board with getting Ivy out of there, not because I don't like him, not because I don't believe in him, but because it just didn't seem like he was fitting. I was talking about this with the Red Wings guys because they have Nate Danielson, who's this similar situation. He's a young guy that has had some injury issues. He clearly a talented player, highly touted, but he just has not fit well with the team due to injuries and just not getting the timing right. That's the way it was with Ivy too. Even when Cade went down and we saw all that Dennis Jenkins, and I'm a huge Dennis Jenkins fan. I didn't know his name, I guess, until a few months ago. But we had a chance for Ivy to really take control of his career there, but then he wasn't healthy. He had a very unfortunate, injury situation. But I do like the idea of adding Huerter, another veteran that's kind of in the mold of Duncan Robinson. He's not the same player, but in a lot of ways, Robinson was really one of the only guys outside of the, obviously nobody's going to replace Cade, but they were, I think in the first half of the season, at least, they were 5-1 in games that Cade didn't start when Danis was typically starting. And Duncan seemed like the only guy that if he went out, it was like, what do we even do with this lineup? Do we throw a lot of defenders at him? Do we get, a high energy thing going with Ron Holland and Thompson in the same lineup and sacrifice shooting? Do we try to go double big? And thankfully they really haven't had to do that, but I do think he's part of the insurance plan for Duncan.
Yeah, Duncan Robinson is very important. I probably said this on your show, and early in the year, I think I was on a general, it wasn't even a Pistons-specific podcast. I can't even remember which one it was, and they asked me to name the 5 most important Pistons for the season, and you go through the list of Cade and Duran and Asar, and at that time coming into the season, I thought Jaden Ivey, obviously, and, that thing has changed. But I mentioned Duncan Robinson as my 5th, and not because I don't even know if that's the right answer or not, but I felt very strongly that he was vital for this team when you look at potential floor spacing. And we talk about this team struggling with floor spacing and three-point volume and all of that to begin with. Can you imagine if Duncan Robinson's not there? I mean, you go from bottom 10 in the NBA to one of the worst, maybe the worst non-tanking team. You got to have to throw some of those teams out of there because they are purposely trying to lose right now. So I think he's a very important piece to this team. I think he's going to be – people talk about him not being in the playoff rotation because he's been played off the court in the playoffs with the Heat and stuff. And I don't personally see a world where that can happen because they just have to make up for him defensively if that's going to be an issue, because the offense is just so important in terms of his ability to space the court.
And that is one of the real pluses of this team. It does work well with a Duncan Robinson that maybe is, to me, I don't know if I've discussed this with you specifically. I have with some of the Pistons pundits, Bryce, but Duncan is my Mendoza line for being played off the floor. it's like he's right on the line. He doesn't always get played off the floor, but he has at times, and he's he can get the point of attack defense going, and he's not bad, but it just depends on the alignment. But with this Pistons team, with the fact that you've got Duren playing better defense, Cade as the star player, not exactly playing Luka Doncic style defense. He's out there playing defense. He's got good size. And then you're throwing a myriad of other defenders into the mix, depending on who's on the court at that same time, with Thompson obviously starting with them. Then you've got Holland, you've got Green. It's Stewart, obviously. It's chaos when those other guys are in there. So one Duncan Robinson doesn't really drain you too much or put you in a bad position if you've got all those other names that I listed.
You know who the X factor is to me defensively for this team in the playoffs? Is actually Tobias Harris. Because I agree with you. You can survive a Duncan Robinson defender because he tries so hard. Like, Duncan Robinson tries. Like, we can be honest here. He's just limited in terms of his ability to move laterally, to hold up physically in terms of strength, that type of stuff. But if you put a scheme together where it's like Duncan do this and then everybody else is going to do their job and make up for it, then I think you can manage that and make that work. And I agree with what you said about Cade. I think Asar Thompson will be first-team all-defense as long as he meets the threshold in terms of games. And Jalen Duren has improved. And then you have, if you bring in Stewart, obviously he's incredible. Ron Holland, I think, has taken a step forward defensively. Javonte's good defensively. I think Karis LeVert's good defensively. I think Tobias and where he's going to be at defensively in the playoffs is one of these sneaky things I'm watching. Because I feel like there's been some real regression from him. And, understandably so, man. He's put a lot of miles in the NBA. If he really struggles to defend, especially in space at the three-point line, all of a sudden you go to potentially two below neutral defenders, and that's a lot harder to cover for when you get into an NBA playoff series where teams are scheming night in and night out, have played you a couple times, and have identified your weaknesses and are really honed in on exploiting them.
I totally agree, and I've seen that as well, because one of the things that stuck out to me in the season last year, especially the playoffs, when people were talking about, okay, they don't have Ivy, they don't have Stewart for this Knicks series, but they still were pretty competitive. One of the reasons I thought they were so competitive that wasn't as obvious as, say, like Cade carrying them or some of the other players being very pivotal, Tobias Harris's defense against Karl Anthony Towns specifically, but just overall, was very impressive to me in that series. And I thought, man, I always knew he was built solid, but I guess I didn't have him being able to not be backed down by a guy like Karl Anthony Towns, who I know is on the outside and on the perimeter a lot of the time too. But when he went into that post, Tobias was not going anywhere. He was sitting back. He was low man wins, and he was able to hold up pretty well. But that's always the thing that I've wondered for this team throughout the season. I know they need more shooting. I know that was the discussion at the deadline. They had Herter. We talked about that a little bit. But the other part of it was I'm a big Harris fan. I think he's a pivotal part of this team. But the part that I was unsure about is, do we either acquire somebody at the deadline that shooting for, that they were talking about a lot of guys, not necessarily for Harris, but in addition to Harris, or do we see more double big lineups with Stu and Duren, especially because Reed has played so well. So then your depth isn't as bad if you elevate Stewart, because Reed, no matter what they've thrown at him, that guy's been quietly very impressive this year.
No, I agree. And that's why. So I thought coming out of the All-Star break, we saw JB go to what I would guess was his comfort level with the 10-man rotation. Now we've had some injuries and stuff like that. I think they have a little bit of an easy stretch coming up here, 2 against the Wizards and then maybe the Warriors or something like that. The down the stretch, though, like the last 10 games, there's some really good games. I'm interested to see how JB approaches it, and some of it may have to do where the standings land at that point. And that's why I think getting these next few games, especially after the Toronto loss, would be really good for them to see if we see them start to put together some of those playoff rotations. Do we see, not in the starting lineup, I don't think you get to the playoffs and change the starting lineup unless you get to like a game 7 or something, and something has obviously not been working, or some lineup has really been working or whatever. But we've seen Stu and Duran play together, but are there more stretches of it? Here recently, we've seen them at least sprinkle in a little bit of Herter and Duncan Robinson on the floor together with Cade. Do we see a little bit more of that? Again, we've seen Sasser play a little bit more recently. Do we see more of that? Does Jenkins get back in? So maybe not over the next week or so, Ryan, but there's going to be a stretch of games there where I think they're playing against quality teams that are vying for playoff position and all of that. Not when you get to the very last few days, because who knows where teams are going to be at there. But there's going to be a 2-week stretch here at the end of the month. I will be really, really interested as we see if JB tips his hand, so to speak, in terms of maybe what he's looking towards using come playoff time.
That's been one of the most intriguing questions of the season for me. I think we'll probably come back with that. We'll have to take a quick break, but we'll come back with Bryce Simon of the Pistons Pulse podcast and talk about potential playoff rotations here for the Pistons. That's a lot of P's. We've got the alliteration going today. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Bryce Simon of the Pistons Pulse podcast and the Game Theory podcast, talking some Pistons. And you hit on a good subject there, Bryce. We don't often, you do a great job of covering the games, and we direct people to your recaps and stuff, but I don't always go game by game with the analysis. I'm more kind of the top-down view, but that's what is interesting to me about this team is I know it's early to be talking playoff rotations, but they're firmly in the playoffs, and it's such an intriguing thing with this particular team because I know the history of the NBA and how rotations tend to get condensed when you get into the playoffs, but that's one of the things that stuck out to me about this team is maybe they're not the most top heavy as far as talent at the top. They are with their number one. Their number one is competitive with pretty much any team's number one, but there's always a discussion of who's the number two. Duran's been dominant this season. We don't have to have that discussion right now, but the depth has been the advantage for this team, and the fact that on any given day, if somebody's not working, somebody else has it going. It's like you're spinning a roulette wheel and saying, okay, well, I didn't hit this time. I'll just spin again and say, okay, well, Thompson looks flat. Okay, it's time for Ron Holland. Okay, well, Javonte Green needs to spell him now. Well, we've got one guy out of the big man rotation. Let's see more Paul Reed. Well, we need some minutes off the bench from a pick-me-up guard. Okay, Marcus Sasser, let's call your number. Danis obviously has been in the conversation, and that's without really mentioning a starter. Those are the bench players that get thrown in there. So it is going to be intriguing because I think he might have a set rotation, but then also have the audible to go, okay, maybe Javonte Green's not in this rotation or Paul Reed, but we're looking flat right now, and I'm calling their number. And as a few of them have said this year, you don't have to get ready if you stay ready.
Yeah, I think I've come to, we talk 9-man rotations, 8-man rotations, whatever come playoff time. If I had to bet right now, Ryan, I think I would put my money that JB's going to play 10 guys in if you just pick a random playoff game in a series. Right now, you get to a game 7 where Cade might play 42 minutes and Duran might play 40 minutes, and if Harris has it going, I'm not talking about game 7s, but game 2, game 3, game 4. I just feel like we're probably going to see 10-man rotations from JB, and I wonder if you ask him him and his staff, if they could tell you what that 10-man rotation would be right now. I truly don't know if they would be able to answer you solidly, and they may be able to. But 10 days ago, I would have told you Danis Jenkins was solidly in the 10-man playoff rotation. And again, as I just said, he didn't get in the rotation against Toronto with 11 guys playing. Sasser played, LeVert played, Herter played. I think I feel confident saying the 5 starters are going to be the 5 starters. Isaiah Stewart is going to be in the rotation. I think Ron Holland is going to get his chance. Now, we'll see how that looks come playoff time where he's essentially a non-shooter right now, Ryan. I know he takes them more than Asar Thompson, but he doesn't make them any more than Asar Thompson does. Teams are going to dare him to shoot in the playoffs. And so I think you're going to play him. I'm interested to see what it ends up looking like. After that, I don't know. I mean, I think Javonte Green has probably played himself into that conversation. When I looked the other day, he was shooting like 50% on corner threes. And then he just plays so hard defensively. But the backcourt, like the true guard rotation, I assume JB is going to trust Karis LeVert, so you probably should put him in there. I know the fan base isn't a huge fan of his, but then is it Dennis? Is it Sasser? Is it Herter? I don't know. It is going to be. I'm so intrigued. I'm so excited to be there for Game 1 to see it play out in person.
Exactly, because I don't think it'd be very hard to bet on this, as you mentioned, because I don't think a lot of people, certainly not at the beginning of the season, but even now, I'm with you on Javonte Green. That was one of the names I was going to mention, and I was going to talk about the corner three thing, because he does make the defense guard him a little bit more, or at least worry about him, especially when he's in the corner, because he knows that he's drawn to that corner. It always seems to be open for him, and there's a little bit more elasticity to the defense when he's out there, rather than Thompson. He can get it with the cutting. That's one part. That's a nice part, because it's not all about can you shoot, it's what can you do with that defensive alignment. And he can get to the back door. Kind of same with Holland. He does put pressure on the defense by his aggressive driving, even if they are down low and sagging off of him. But I agree that he hasn't found his shot yet. I know that's the big talk with those two, but if they can just tick that up a little bit and make the defense honest, obviously that would be huge. Who had Beef Stew as a better shooter at this point than those two guys?
No, I mean, it's and I want to be clear when I say this. I still believe in Ron Holland as a floor spacer long term. I do. I don't know what it is. Him compared to Asar, I don't know that I think Asar is ever going to really get there. And, that's a conversation for the offseason, bigger picture, or whatever. It doesn't have to be right now. I still just kind of believe in the mechanics and the fluidity of Ron's shot. We've seen stretches where he's made it. I don't think it's going to be there come playoffs this season. And so I've made the argument going back a couple weeks ago. I just think he should start turning it down in general. Like, you take one. If you knock it down, maybe you take the next one. But in general, what he's going to have to do in the playoffs is what you just said. He's going to have to cut at the right time. He's going to have to stampede attack. He's going to have to attack space and then either hit a little floater, maybe a little jumper. He may have to catch and then drive into a handoff or something like that. But I think that's the way he's going to have to be effective in the 2026 playoffs for the Pistons. And at this point in the season, I think that's what he should start doing even in the regular season. So in some ways, I think he should abandon the three-point jumper and start playing into all of those things so that he's preparing himself for that when he has to do it in the playoffs. And again, I'm not saying he can't ever shoot one again. And I think you come back next regular season and he takes all of them. And hopefully he's improved. But a lot of what this final month, to me, should look like for Detroit is hashing out those things. I made the same argument a month ago about Asar Thompson. I was fine that they were putting the ball in Asar Thompson's hands early in the season. I don't think it went particularly well, and so I don't need to see it anymore. Let him play off the ball. Let him figure out his spots, his cutting, his offensive rebound, and all of those things. We can come back next year and see what he can do when you put the ball in his hands and let him attack that way.
I like that plan, because one thing that people do kind of undercut in the NBA and in sports in general is that if you do have a younger team, these guys can improve throughout the season, but there also is a cap to that. And there's a point where you go, okay, we've got to get playoff ready. We've got to get the rotation going. We've got to not stretch you too far outside. If this wasn't working in game 37, then we're not going to try it in game 87 in the middle of one of the playoff series. And so I do like that plan. Thompson is just such an interesting player to me because I know it comes down to his shot a lot. But the part that I feel like he can improve before even the jumper improves is he's able to get pretty much anywhere on the floor. But once he gets there, he doesn't quite know what to do from those particular spots. So, like you said, finding his spots and knowing he's like the opposite of Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris only goes to certain spots, and he knows exactly where he's going and what he wants to do in those spots.
Yeah.
Thompson can get anywhere. Harris can't get anywhere anymore. No insult to him. He's older, and that's not what he wants to do. Thompson can get anywhere, but it's like once he gets somewhere, he's like, now what do I do? I'm wide open in the middle of the floor. Do I go to a floater? Do I pass? Do I try to take a Euro step? Once he gets a little bit more confident in the decision making, even that part will help his game.
There is some indecisiveness with him when he gets in there. You know, I don't mean to make this comparison. People will get mad at me, but there's every fourth or fifth game, he has a Ben Simmons moment where I'm like, Asar, you are big and you are a 1% athlete in the NBA. Just jump and score that. Why are we looking to kick that out to the weak side corner? And none of them are as bad as the Ben Simmons one that everybody, references or whatever. But there is a little bit of exactly what you said. He gets to these spots and then he hesitates or he pivots or he passes it out or, hey, you're triple team this time. Now you should be passing it out. And that's why I'd like to see him just lean into this off-the-ball, play on the baseline, cut at the right times, offensive rebound. Make sure you and Jalen Duren don't end up in the same spots on the court where one defender can guard both of you. And I think we will probably see that here down the stretch. I do always just want to say with Asar, he is a first-team all-defense level defender. He is probably the best perimeter defender in the NBA right now. And so when you take out all the bigs, right, Wembanyama and Chet and Rudy and take out Bam, you take out all those guys, and you're just going pure perimeter defenders, I think it's at least fair to say there's nobody better than Asar Thompson. And so I think it's always important to highlight that he is just he's unreal on that end of the court.
I agree, and I do think his offense is going to come along. Like you're talking about, as a cutter, he has done some very good things, and that's an underrated part of this team. Obviously, Cade's the one setting the table for everybody, but, man, those bigs can pass. Duran's a better passer than I think people gave him credit for early on. Beef Stew's a better passer, I think, than people gave him credit for, and so they've found that movement on the floor that's worked really well, and you can see Herter kind of fitting in with that a little bit more. And it's almost like he's ahead of where Ivy was in fitting in on the floor, even though he's had a lot less time because he's more used to having to fit in and fit in different teams that maybe weren't the best iterations like those Bulls and Kings teams that he was on. But yeah, interesting discussion. I'm glad you're going to the game. Hopefully we'll be able to talk to you around the playoff time here, and hopefully we're going to have a lot of playoffs to talk about. I'm hoping for multiple series here, as I'm sure you are too, Bryce. But tell people all the places they can follow you here in the meantime.
Yeah, that was my hard decision. Like, do I go out for round one, and then, like, am I going to pass up if they make it to the conference finals or the NBA finals or something? But we'll start with game one of round one, and then we'll figure it out from there. So always a pleasure to join you. Thank you for having me. And, yeah, people can follow me on Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky, and then, of course, have the Motor City Hoops Substack. You've referenced it a couple times. It's just raw notes and analysis after the game. It's not paragraph. There's not a whole lot of punctuation or anything. I just type stuff in as I see it. Sometimes it ends up 5 pages. Sometimes it ends up 2.5 pages. It kind of depends on how the game goes. But if you guys are into the Pistons, I feel like it's pretty decent content for being completely free. So go ahead and go over there and subscribe if you get a chance. And then, of course, listen to the Pistons Pulse when you're not listening to Ryan here on the radio.
Yeah, definitely listen to that first. That's I appreciate you plugging us. But yeah, no, it's a great podcast. We've been trying to get Omari on, but he's been busy. He's been a busy guy, and we understand with all his writing duties. But we're very happy to have you on, and yeah, we'll look forward to having you on again. And hopefully, the game you go to in the playoffs, Red Panda is the halftime show.
And I will completely miss it.
Yeah, you'll be in the bathroom or something, or doing your notes.
Yes.
But no, appreciate it, Bryce, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Have a great evening.
You too. Thanks to Bryce Simon. Appreciate him coming on. Always great stuff from him. Be sure to follow all those places, especially those two podcasts. Not that you shouldn't follow his Substack as well. That's a great kind of cliff notes of the Pistons games, so you can kind of follow along if you need some help kind of taking in what's happening. That he's got a lot of great notes in there. But the Pistons Pulse podcast is with Omari Sankofa, one of the primary beat writers for the Pistons. So that's a great podcast. And then Sam Vicini, it does the Game Theory podcast with him. So that's kind of a more general NBA podcast. So just wanted to outline that for people. But we'll take a quick break and we'll come back in studio with Ron to see if he's been thinking about pandas at all. And he also hasn't been eating anything. I'm a little disappointed that he hasn't had anything during the show. But stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Happy you could join us here for National Panda Day and all the hijinks and all the great guests. Appreciate MLB calling in from Lakeland. Had a nice talk with him. Gave us an update on baseball. Zack Trathen and Carlo Mario from the Hockeytown Rundown. Always good chatting with them. Be sure to follow them. Justin Jennings, that was a great interview. I'll look forward to having him back. He's a great Purdue contact. It has contact with the current coach, and they're a sneaky team in this tournament here. I know there's a lot of Michigan and Michigan State fans that listen to this, and that's normal, and they're still pretty prominent teams. They're 1 and 3 seeds in the tournament here respectively, but Purdue's right in the middle. They're a number 2 seed in one of the favorites, probably one of the 12 15 teams that could possibly go all the way. But appreciate him coming on. Bryce Simon, always good stuff from him. Talked about his podcast where you can follow him. Want to thank our sponsors as well, Collectible Insurance Services, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry. I'm in their pool for March Madness, and Tate, who must be 9, I keep calling him 8, but he's had to have turned 9 by now, will probably beat me in the brackets here because I think he placed second of like 100 people in their bracket and picked the champion, right? So I'm going to cheat off his notes and see who Tate picks this year. Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Rydan Investments, Encore Business Group, Jim Haglund of JH Realty, Williams Chiropractic, iCore, and the West Michigan Sports Commission. Appreciate all of their support here. Appreciate Mom hanging out with me in studio. She has a full-blown coat on in studio. She's ready to go outside. She's been ready for an hour and a half. Aaron has his coat on too. It's not as prominent as Mom's coat. It's more supporting the brands that you work for. Everybody just shakes their head at me when I observe things in the studio. They're like, "Why are you paying attention to me? Quit paying attention to me. I don't want to talk about any of this stuff." But be sure to tune into the rest of the Jethro lineup too. Got to talk about that. You've got Conrad and Rowdy holding it down during the day. I think Conrad's back, I believe. He's back from his vacation, so he'll be in his regular shift during the morning and early afternoon, and then Rowdy from 2 to 7. And then you've got the next sports show will be The Sports Project with the Sports Professor on Wednesday from 7 to 9. Then you've got Shane Graham's Extra Points. They reportedly did very well without me. They might be trying to replace me on that show here now. Jeff and Shane did well and had some good talks. I'm excited to listen to them. But I'll be back in studio with Shane this Thursday and then resume the conversation with him, and looking forward to that. And then got to tune into the Sports Project on Saturday, 10 to 12. Then you've got the Polka Pops. I don't know who's going to be doing it. I don't know if Mike's going to be back or what's going to be going on. Aaron, are you familiar with Weird Al? Do you know who Weird Al Yankovic is?
Yes, I do.
You're the right age for that. I've asked Mike if he's heard of Weird Al, and it was a very odd conversation that I had on air. It's even odd for me, I think, by my standards. But he plays polkas. He does kind of shed light on polkas. I know he's known as the parody guy.
That's
but
the stuff
yeah, Amish Paradise and some of those kinds of songs. But he does polkas on his. That's like his musical genre, if he actually has one. So one day I want to get Mike to play a Weird Al song. I don't know. That might not make Scott
you
happy.
Can request it if he's working. On Saturdays or whatever, calling in for a request.
I'm going to call Jeff on the All Request show and then request it on there. And then say, and he'll be like, no, we only play classic country here. But yeah, be sure to tune into his show as well. And then, we'll be back here from 7 to 9 with conversations about in-depth sports and also pandas and polkas, because that's the variety that we've covered here today. So appreciate you hanging with us, and make sure to stay informed and stay vigilant, and have a great week.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Collectible Insurance Services, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Rydan Investments, Encore Business Group, Jim Hegland of JH Realty, Williams Chiropractic, I-Core, the West Michigan Sports Commission.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.